representing Franchise Secrets, Eric Von Horn.
Hey listeners, if you're not in the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. Now, this is a large community of franchisees, franchisors, buyers, sellers, anybody that's involved in franchising in any way. It's the community to go to, ask your questions, get answers, help people out, and get help. It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. So I have this PDF at franchisesecrets.com/validation, 100 plus questions to ask franchisees before you buy a franchise. Like I said before, take it, copy it, use it, make it your own, do whatever you want with it, make it better. But these are something that I put together for you for free. 100 plus questions, 13 different categories. And we'll go through all the categories. Category number 1, background questions. The purpose behind background questions are you get to know the franchisee that you're talking to. You get to understand who they are, who you're actually talking with, their background, and this, you also want to understand if they're a low performer, top performer, or middle performer, because they all see the world or the franchise differently, or they usually do. And you want to understand how they've progressed in the franchise, because if they were a bottom performer, now they're a top performer, they probably have some really good things to say about that particular franchise. So you just know who you're talking to. Also, you want to understand, is this person like you? Is this just because someone makes a bunch of money and they love the franchise, that is great. But if they are the complete opposite of you, that's not so great. If they are a type A, sales-driven marketing machine and you are the opposite of that, that's a big red flag. Unless one of the questions I would ask them, are there people that are like me, reserved, not sales oriented, not marketing focused, that are crushing it like you? So that's what you want to look for. So some of the questions that I like to ask is, what's your main role in the business? Because everyone has different roles in the business. And if you don't understand what their role is, you're not really going to understand if that's the role that you want to have. You want to understand how many locations they have, how many they have open, or trucks, or whatever it is, because you want to get a sense of the scope and size of their business. They might have 10 trucks out in the field working for them, where you're going to start out with 1. So the financial part of this is what it's going to look like down the road for you, or could look like down the road for you. So the questions are going to be much more future oriented, or lessons that they've learned along the way. So you just want to understand, again, who you're talking to. And then just a lot about their background. Why did you decide to buy? That's a good question to ask at this time. Why did you decide to buy? So they're probably going to start out by answering why they decided to look, and then get into why did they decide to buy. And you want to make sure some of those are similar to what you're thinking. And again, timing makes a difference. If they did this 10 years ago versus last year, timing's very different. You just want to understand who you're talking to. So that's a good question to ask. But now you understand who you're talking to, you can frame these questions differently, or at least have, when you're getting answers back, be able to categorize them. I'm talking to a low performer or a top performer, or someone that's like me, or someone that's opposite than me. So ownership type. This is another category, ownership type. You want to have a plan of how you want to own the business. Maybe you're going to be a semi-absentee owner. You're going to start out semi-absentee. Maybe you're going to start out in the business, move to semi-absentee. Maybe you're going to be an owner-operator. Like I said at the very beginning, you need to know your own expectation and validate that. You want to have the same ability to own the way that they're owning. If they are owning as semi-absentee, they start out as semi-absentee, and that's your goal, then that's who you're talking to. And that's really one of the first questions that I would ask. Did you start out that way? A lot of people miss this. They ask, are you in the business semi-absentee? Is the business providing you flexibility and freedom that you want? They don't know that this person spent 4 years working in the business before they were able to hire a manager that took half the workload from them. So it's really important to know if they started out that way or if they transitioned into their current role. You want to understand how flexible the business really is, because franchisors will tell you it's flexible, but what does that really mean in the real world? The franchisor has an idea of what that means, but that doesn't mean the franchisees are executing it the way the franchisor thinks semi-absentee should be executed. So you want to validate that. One of my favorite things to do here is to have a really clear understanding of, does the franchisee's version of semi-absentee correlate to the franchisor's version of semi-absentee or owner-operator or whatever it is that your expectations are. So it's a good follow-up question to ask. Is this what the franchisee sees as semi-absentee? Is this how the franchisor, do they see 60 hours a week as an owner-operator as an average amount of time that you should be putting into it? And here's one of the last questions. I've got 8 different questions in the ownership type, but number 8 is really, does the model work well for fill in the blank, for an owner operator, for semi-absentee? Does the model work well? Just because they're doing it doesn't mean the model was designed for it. Doesn't mean the model works well with it. So you want to understand if the model works well for it. All right, here's another category. Life as a franchisee. You really want to dive into this because this is going to be your reality in the future.
If you want to go deeper as a franchisee, then check out the Franchise Tribe Mastermind. It's a tribe of franchisees across many different brands, sectors, and industries with many things in common besides just franchising. Things like being growth-minded and having a lifestyle focus, remembering why you got into business in the first place, learning from others' mistakes versus just making a bunch of your own mistakes, or helping people avoid the mistakes that you've made, a desire to shortcut the path to success. In other words, franchisees who want to be around like-minded, solution-oriented A players. Check out franchisesecrets.com/mastermind.
This is about what you're going to be doing as an owner. What are the key things that you do as an owner? If they say I dress up in a costume as Lady Liberty and they go around deliver boxes of donuts, 3 hours a day, every day, you need to know that. They might just say, hey, I market 3 hours a day. But if it's dressing up in a costume, and I say that because I did that as an owner, as CEO of my business, I was in the stinking Lady Liberty dress with boxes of donuts, driving around, getting rejected, but I was growing my business, and that's what it took. I eventually got out of that, but it wasn't anytime soon. I was doing that often. So you really want to understand what the life is like for an owner. What are they doing? And again, if someone says I'm marketing, what does that look like? You're marketing 3 hours a day. So are you on social media? Are you out building a relationship? Are you out giving speeches and networking? What does marketing look like? Or are you dressed up in a costume that you absolutely hate, but you know it brings in business, so you actually do it? So you want to know what life is really like. If you want to know if they're working on or in their business. That's really important. Like, what are they doing? Are they working in the business all the time? Or they say, I spend about 3 hours a day in the business. Is that in the business or is that on the business? So you really want to make sure that you're getting a clear answer here. And here's a follow-up question to that. Was that the original plan? What you're doing today in the business, is that originally what you wanted to do in the business? And then if it isn't, why not? What happened? And why were your expectations off? And what expectations should I have? Because maybe the franchisor has fixed some things, and now all of a sudden where the franchisee was doing things, maybe they had to have their own call center, and that's what that franchisee was doing for so many hours a day. Now that's outsourced. And now you don't have to worry about that. So there's just so many different follow-up questions that you should be having. But life as a franchisee is really important because their life is about to become your life. And you want to make sure you understand what your life might really be like. All right, Here we go. Sales, marketing, and lead generation. How much or how little do they help you with that? How much does the brand understand or really care about it? That's important. This is what we're validating. How much does the brand know about marketing, know about sales, know about lead generation? And not only that, how much do they care about that? Because if they care about it, they're putting money towards it from a corporate staff or vendors or whatever it is. But you want to understand how much they really care about it, how much they know about it. You want to validate their vendors, and validate their vendors with franchisees. If the franchisor is telling you how they have great vendors, ask the franchisees, how great are their marketing vendors? How great are their lead generation vendors? Because it doesn't matter what the franchisor says. It does, but you need to validate that. If they're always saying things that are too inflated consistently, that's a red flag. If they're consistently saying things that are accurate, meaning the franchisees continue to say, yes, the franchisor is doing X, Y, and Z, and the franchisor is saying we do X, Y, and Z. If that's a consistent message, consistent validation, what you're hearing, that's a good sign. So marketing, sales, and lead generation. What are some of the best things that you do to gain more customers? What are the best things that you do to gain more customers? What you're looking for here is, and this is question 4 of 6 questions that I have here. So question 4, what are the best things that you do to gain more customers? Are you looking, if you hear word of mouth, that's not something where you can put more money into it and gain more customers. If you hear referrals, it's the same thing because you need a lot of customers to be able to get a lot of referrals. So those are things that you really don't want to hear. From a health of a business standpoint, you absolutely want to hear that because you want to have those referrals. You want to have repeat business, but that's not going to help you out in your first year in business. You want to hear things like the franchisor has these amazing vendors where all I had to do was give them money, leads started coming in, and then the franchisor started to help me. They have sales calls every week where they are helping me with these different questions that we get in the sales process. And I'm not only hearing it from the franchisor, I'm hearing it from franchisees because they're learning and they're growing and they're helping us answer these questions. So they're helping with the sales aspect of it too. And they have sales training. It might be their own training. It might be outsourced training, but they're training you or the person that is on the phone or the person that is in front of the customer actually sell the job. So what you want to hear here is more training. The franchisor is always evolving and they're doing a really good job of helping things that I can either turn up the lead flow on, or I can learn more with marketing and sales because the franchisor values it and they're helping. So that's what you want to hear, that question. What are the best things you do to gain more customers? If you start to hear things like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, you follow up, where did you learn that from? And they say, I learned it myself, then that is a possible red flag or just a very proud franchisee that doesn't really want to give credit where credit is due. So does the franchisor have fantastic, great vendors for lead generation, for marketing, for sales? You want to make sure, and might not get the names, and you probably won't get the names. That's not the goal. If they say, gosh, they have 3 great vendors for this or 3 great trainings for this. Again, the franchisor might not want to give up where their secret vendors or different things, but you just want to understand the franchisee's perception of that so that way you can have an accurate perception. All right, let's move on to performance, and then we're getting into financials. So you see how there's a number of categories before you get into the financials. Number of reasons for that. One, these are just things that, again, you need to understand who you're talking to, but you also just need to get to know them. By this time, after we get through performance, this is where you start to understand who that person is, how open they are, so you know where to go with the financial questions. So performance, what you're looking for here is honesty. You want to make sure that this franchisee is being honest with you. And some of the most honest franchisees will say, hey, I learned this. I didn't do this right. I should have done this. And they tell you about the lessons that they've learned along the way. That's how you know you're talking to a more honest franchisee, not a franchisee that thinks they did it all on their own. You want to have a deep understanding of the whys of performance. Why did are they underperforming? Why are they top performing? The whys of it all. So this is where you want to go deeper with these different questions. This again, who you're talking to is so important here. So here's some questions that I have 13 questions in performance. Here are some of them. What separates the highest performers from the lowest performers? What are they doing different? Why are they doing differently? Why would someone do it this way versus that way? You want to because they're talking about this from a neutral position. They might be a high performer, they might be a low performer, but now they're just giving you insight into the high performers or the low performers. They're not telling you about themselves. So you start to get some pretty accurate information here. You also want to include middle performers in here as well. And then you want to, maybe a follow-up question. How many people were bottom performers and they eventually became middle performers or top performers? Because that means the franchisor has a framework to take a bottom performer to a top performer. And that's really important. If the franchisor knows their bottom performers, wants to help them get to the top performers, that's a really good thing. And by the way, here's a quick tip. Most bottom performers won't make it to a top performer, but middle performers will. It's a lot of time and attention's focused on the bottom performers as a franchisor, but the middle performers, it's best to get them up to a top performer. But whenever I hear how they've taken bottom performers and taken them to top performers, it's always a really good thing for that franchisor. Why are the underperformers not doing well? Just a standalone question. It's my question number 5, but why are the bottom performers not doing well? And they'll give you different reasons why they think, and and there's probably a lot of truth to it. You want to hear things like they are just trying to do things their own way. They got too expensive real estate when they shouldn't have. Well, tell me more about that. That's a great rabbit hole to go down, because did they just do that on their own? Did the model change? Are they just a lone ranger out there doing things on their own? So this is a really good one. What you want to hear is they just didn't follow the system. They didn't do what they were supposed to do, or they are the typical engineer mindset, and what you need here is a hardcore insurance salesperson's mindset and background to really do well. Boy, if you're good at sales, that's really good news for you. But if you are an introvert, that is not so exciting, and that's a big red flag. Couple more questions here. Are you considered a top performer, middle performer, or low performer? Now, by this time, you should know a little bit. You can say, where are you in the mix? Have you always been there, and what's changed? And so that way you clearly know who you're talking to and what their background was, or what they're going to do to move up into the top performer status. And then last question here in performance, again, 13 questions. This is my last one. How helpful are franchisees to each other? How helpful are franchisees to each other? That's a really important question to ask. Another one, another category is a financial, and this is what most people start to do right away without having any of these other questions asked beforehand. And so you don't know who you're talking to. If you didn't ask any of these questions, you wouldn't know who you're talking to at this point. And that's the goal. You need to know who you're talking to. So when you get to the financials, the questions are good, but the answers are even better, because now you have context for these answers. So this is what everybody wants. And you can frame these questions to be a little bit more general, or you can frame them to be dead on. If you frame them to be a little bit more general, how would an average person answer this question? Here's question number 1. I've got 13 questions in the financial part, but question number 1, do you feel like you're getting an ROI on your royalties? Do you feel like you're getting an ROI on your royalties? That's a really good question to ask. You're going to get different responses, obviously. You need to know who you're talking to make sure that, or you can say, what do you think a top performer, how would they answer this question? How would a top performer feel about the ROI on their royalties? They're probably feeling pretty good about it. But you need to know who you're talking to, frame these questions different ways. Average time to profitability or cash flow? Average time to profitability or cash flow. Guys, making massive amounts of money is really good, but if it takes 20 years to get there, that's not so good, unless that's the plan. A lot of people want to know net profit right away, but they forget about cash flow. How quickly am I cash flowing? Different industries cash flow differently. Some are really quick. A lot of service-based home service brands cash flow really quickly because you leave training, your phone's ringing probably while you're at training, and the call center is probably taking calls, setting up appointments for your salesperson to start to go to the week that you get back from training. So then you don't have a bunch of payroll. Now you got your first jobs and you're starting to have revenue come in, depending on your expenses, how you've controlled that. That's when you start to cash flow versus you start up a retail type concept where you put a bunch of money out and you have a bunch of training to get your staff to where they need to be. And now you start to have customers, you have a grand opening and you are building up your book of business, your reoccurring revenue and whatnot. And it takes a while to build that business up to where that reoccurring revenue is greater than your expenses. But boy, once that reoccurring revenue is greater than those expenses and you don't have much attrition, that's when that business is a really nice business. You just need to find out when it gets there, do you have accurate expectations? If your expectations are 3 months and it's actually 13 months, you need to understand why. Maybe you just need to readjust your expectations and it fits, or you need to look at a different business. But this is where you start to understand that based on cash flow. Your definitions of cash flow or profitability need to be the same. You need to probably follow up a few times with that question to make sure that you are asking it the same way that they are thinking that you're asking it. Because they might think, you mean when do I get all my expenses back, everything that I put out into this business? Or they might be thinking, I have revenue greater than my expenses on month number 2. That's my definition of cash flow. And is that expected to continue? And how does that grow? So that's what I like about the cash flow question. Here's another one. This is the question number 6, at least in my the PDF that I have for you. How much working capital did you start with, and did you need to add additional funds? This is so important. This lets you know what they started with and their own expectations were either on or off based on if they needed more funds. And I should say may or may be on or off based on if they needed more funds. Maybe they are just super pessimistic and they planned on having 50% more cash in the bank for a rainy day and they actually used all of it. Or maybe they were super optimistic, maybe like you are, and they needed to have another $100,000 to be able to get to that cash flow break-even point. To ask the question, follow up, make sure that you have accurate expectations and you guys are talking the same language. So follow up with clarification questions to make sure it's really accurate. Here's another one. How accurate are the build out expenses and other expenses in the item 7 in the FDD? This is where you tie it back to the FDD. And they might not be aware of what it is in the FDD. So just bring that up and say, hey, in the FDD, it says I should allocate $100,000 for X, Y, and Z. Is that what you experience? So this is where you start to see if the FDD is pretty outdated. We're all dealing with inflation. Things are getting more expensive. The price of wood has gone up tremendously. So you just need to make sure that the time frame of some of this stuff may be off. So that's a really, really important thing. Or it might be the franchisor is underestimating item 7 to get more franchises sold than what more than they should be underestimating it. My experience, I love it when franchisors are very strong in their item 7, meaning they want to have those expenses very accurate or even like higher than what might be expected. Because I love it when I talk to franchisees in validation. They're like, hey, I put about a bunch of money for marketing or for build out for this, but it was absolutely accurate. That's what you want to hear. 2 other questions in the financials. Did you get a loan? Did you get a loan? And what kind was it? SBA, 401k, HELOC, et cetera. That's an important one. Why? Emerging brands, you may not be able to get a loan or an SBA loan or something with it, or if everyone's financing through a HELOC, home equity line of credit, and you're not able to do that because you don't have equity in a home, that's a big red flag. So you want to make sure that they're financing it the way that you're financing it. What if they all paid cash for it and you need the financing? Is there a way to finance it? And sometimes franchisees find this out too late. They pay for the $40,000 franchise fee, $50,000 franchise fee, and yet they realize they can't get a loan the way that they thought they could get a loan. And by the way, some of this you may not have, you buy the franchise, put the franchise fee in there in cash, and then you don't actually get the loan until you start up.
If you're a franchisor and you're interested in becoming one of my private clients, the thing that I do best is help franchisors with their franchise development process. As I've talked to many franchisors over the years, hundreds of franchisors, most of them have broken processes and they have a lot of holes that they are letting really good candidates fall out. The buyers are falling out and they are spending way too much time with the wrong people who don't end up buying. As a result, they are not able to be very effective in that process. I love to help franchisors who have a broken franchise development process or that just needs to be optimized. Message me or email me at eric@franchisesecrets.com, ERIK@franchisesecrets.com, or sign up for the monthly memo and reach out to me.
Another category is relationship. Now, you might not be giving relationship as much credibility as you should, but think about it this way. You are going to have a relationship with this franchisor for a very long time. So spend some time on relationship. See what franchisees, how they view the relationship with the franchisor, so you have accurate expectations of what to expect as you enter into a partnership relationship with this franchisor. What do you like about the support team? So this is where, is this a general broad question, but what do you like about the support team? And you're really getting that relationship with the people that are giving you support. It might be the CFO, might be the CMO, it might be a director of training, it might be somebody that's under them. Most likely it's going to be like a franchise business coach that is your main point of contact and they're helping you out with everything. So let's say it is the franchise business coach. What do they like? What's your relationship like with them? Do they treat you like an employee or do they treat you like a franchisee? What you don't want to hear is I'm treated like an employee, and that's absolutely what I was trying to get away from. This is my business and I need help. I don't need a boss. So you want to understand if the relationship is more like corporate America, where you have to report to somebody and they treat you like an employee, or if they are like a coach, always helping you, putting you in touch with franchisees, giving you the right training, giving you feedback, and always helping you understand the numbers, helping you understand metrics. And you want to hear the word helpful over and over and over as you start to understand like who's going to be helping you. What's the culture like? That's another question. What do you like most or least about the relationship that you have with the franchisor? Now, I said franchisor because they can go all kinds of different ways here. They're going to tell you, they're going to see the franchisor as a franchise business coach, as the founder, as, particular vendors. So they're either going to tell you some of the best things at a global perspective. They're going to all of a sudden hone in on the things that they like about the system in general, or the things that they don't like about the system in general. So I leave this question as a broad question. That way they go where they want to go, and then you can just ask follow-up questions to understand it. Culture. Culture is and that's the last question I have on here. Like, what's the culture like? Now, what is it really like? How do they treat you? How do they treat employees? What would you say? How would you describe their culture? Really important here. Doesn't sound like it, but you want to make sure that you don't, that culture is not different than what you want. If you want a culture that is just like very partnership oriented or very corporate oriented, you're going to have a struggle if the culture is different than what you want it to be. I've seen franchisees sell their franchises, lose money on franchises because of the culture of the franchisor. Really important. Don't underestimate this one. All right. training and support. This is like, you need to verify what you think you need versus really what is delivered. Really important. All brands improve. Think about this. How much will you know about your business 5 years from now? You start it 5 years from now, you know a ton about that business, and you're able to help start a second location or just expand very differently because you've been in the business for 5 years. Same for the franchisor. When they're just starting out, there's just things that they don't know because they haven't experienced it yet. So you just need to know that their training is always going to evolve. So some of the questions, did your initial training prepare you for opening and operating the business? You just need to know if it prepared you. How often do they update the training or put out new training, put out new content, put out new helpful things for you? You need to understand if they're always upgrading what they have, and you want a franchisor that is improving so they are different 5 years from today versus they're doing the same old things and not really improving. So you just want to understand, like question number 9 out of 13 questions. What has the support been like from the franchisor? You need to understand what it has been like up to this point. And then you need to understand where they are in that particular phase. They just had their grand opening. They've been in it for 1 year. They've been in it for 10 years as a franchisee. You need to understand the context for it and how they view it. Because I would rather have a newer franchisee be like, man, their training's amazing. You talk to an existing franchisee that's been there for 10 years and like, it's okay. Well, it's probably just okay because it was probably just okay when they started, versus that new franchisee that's been in it for a year. They're like, their training is amazing. That means they are doing things in training to help improve it, and they are giving really good training. So again, context matters so much. Here's another good question. Number 12, how responsive is the franchisor to time-sensitive needs? This kind of tells you how the franchisor views the urgency or being able to improve and help the franchisee with training and support. So that's just a good one. You can go down different rabbit holes with that, and it might just be just a normal answer. Good. But that's one that might give you some insight that you didn't think about before. Staffing. Make sure that you are going to be managing the same type of person that you want to manage, that you gel with, so in other words, if you have if in staffing, if you are managing a person that you're not used to, maybe they are a white collar person, maybe they're a blue collar person, and you don't want to manage one or the other, then this is probably a big red flag for the business. You probably need to understand that before you actually are managing the person that you didn't want to manage. So this is really important. You need to understand the roles of key staff. So who are the staff members on their team? What kind of staff members are they? What do they do? So you need to understand like who reports to who you would be managing as the franchisee, and who your key manager manages. Because if they're managing blue collar workers, you don't want to manage blue collar workers, but you're managing a highly paid CEO or director of operations. They're managing everybody else. You're not going to be dealing with the people that they're managing. You shouldn't be, because you'll be overstepping boundaries. So you just need to understand who you are going to manage and make sure that that person is the type of person that you want to manage. Go to the first hires. Like who were the first hires that you made? And what was their responsibility? What was their role? And any mistakes that you made along the way? Because this is where you are about to go. Make sure that this is the same thing that you're thinking. If you're hiring a full sales team and then you are that general, or you are that sales team manager, if that's like the path forward to have cash flow quickly, you need to understand that. If the role is to hire a sales team manager, and they hire everybody, you need to understand that as well. And all of this, as you're thinking about it, hearing it, funnels back into the financials. And you need to understand, did this person not make money very quickly because they hired a sales manager, and this other person cash flow real quickly because they were the sales manager? Just things you need to understand. All right, so that's staffing. Got 7 questions in that, and I gave you a couple of them. Here are some general questions that are important, but they didn't fit into any category. What advantages do you have over your competitors? If a franchisor is telling you this is their competitive advantage, this is the thing that they're so good at, but you never hear that from the franchisee in this basic question, then that's probably, something that you need to drill down into. And don't be afraid to ask them, hey, the franchisor is telling me they're great at X, Y, and Z. Ask them that and get some real feedback. But if you just ask that question, what advantages do you have over your competitors? This is where you're going to get the most authentic answer. How long will it take to get my first unit open after I sign the franchise agreement? This is another, I keep saying that's important, but all of these are important because this gives you an accurate expectation of being able to open when you think you're going to open. And a lot of times outside of the service industries, maybe even in the service industry, because of the supply chain issues, you don't open up as quickly as you think you're going to open up. So another really important thing to understand in terms of your expectations of quitting your job or being able to focus on the business. All right. I've got 12 favorite questions. I'm not going to get into all of them. What are the other top performing franchisees doing differently than you're doing? So you didn't say they were bottom performer, middle performer. You just said, what other top performers, what are they doing differently than you're doing? Because they should be able to, when you're talking about somebody else in general, it's easier to talk about because you're not talking about me and my business. So they're usually pretty good about giving up information. So you want to understand what the top performers are doing. And again, I like to understand the top performers. Bottom performers, I need to understand a little bit about it, why they're bottom performers, but top performers, if I don't have what it takes to be a top performer, I'm probably not going to be in that particular franchise. So what are they doing differently than you're doing? A top performer will probably tell you the things that they're doing better. And you just want to continue to dive deeper into that question because top performers are always doing something differently. And maybe they're good at things that you're not good at, or you're good at the same things. You want to understand that. Here's another one. This is kind of a friend of mine told me about this in the Facebook group. What other franchisees in the system that I should talk to? Like, who are they? Who are these other franchisees in the system that I should talk to? Again, this is a very open-ended question. They might give you a bottom performer, a top performer, but they're going to be like, man, you should talk to so-and-so. Why should I talk to them? So you can get into their head of why you should talk to them. Again, you try to ask so many clarification questions during the validation process to make sure that you are seeing things the way that they're seeing things. Because that's more important than them seeing things your way. You want to make sure that they are seeing things the way that you're seeing things. Man, I've got 12 questions in my favorite questions. That's all in there. I'm going to give you one more. How has their system improved? This is number 9. How has their system improved since you joined? You want to hear things of improvement, current and past improvement, because that's part of their culture, continuously improving, always helping their franchisees. If you don't hear much from the franchisee here, another possible red flag. And here's something that's important. Out of all these questions, you're not going to hear everything great about the franchisor. They're normal. They're run by humans. They're always improving. They're always going to be improving. Are they improving? Are they getting better? So just because you have a red flag here, red flag there, doesn't mean it's a bad opportunity. And I think that's important to understand. It's just telling you that you're actually getting accurate information. And that's really good. I have not found the perfect franchisor. And I've been the perfect franchisee, but when you get a good franchisor and a good franchisee, that's magic. All right. Some final questions that people like to ask. Knowing what you know today, would you do it again? Knowing what you know today, would you do it again? Shut up. Let them answer. And I know this is a very generic question that, is you'd find anywhere, and you've probably asked it yourself or been asked it yourself. But the point of it is you just want them to ramble on. Let them talk. If there's some silence for a little bit, let them be the next one to ask a question. So there's, I've got other questions in here and kind of the final questions, but what advice would you have given yourself as a buyer knowing what you know now? That's a really, really good question to ask. What advice would you have given yourself as a buyer knowing what you know now? Guys, you can find all of these questions and more at franchisesecrets.com/validation. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you need to reach out to me for different reasons, check out franchisesecrets.com. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.